Okay, thank you everyone. So excited to see everybody here. I know we're going to have a few more stragglers, but I really do want to get going. My name is Dave Peattie. I am the current Vice President of Publishing Professionals Network, and always really excited for this conference, partly because we have so many great things going on with an amazing keynote address, wonderful sessions, but really for me it's about getting to connect with all of you, and I hope you feel the same, and I hope that if you are new to this conference, new to PPN, new to publishing, that you will take this opportunity to really connect with what I think is a pretty amazing group of people, really fun crowd. So a general welcome. I try to do a land acknowledgement, and I usually read it from a script, and I left that script at home, so I'm going to just try to say that we are really hoping that all of you will remember that we are occupying space that is Wheatland and Ohlone land that was not ceded, unceded land, stolen unfairly, and keep that in your minds. They are still very much here and present and stewards of this land. If you're interested in contributing, there's the Segoria Land Trust, and feel free to contact me at any time because they're an amazing organization and I can connect you with them. Okay, so if you're not familiar with PPN, Publishing Professionals Network, I'm going to give like the 2-minute version of this because I know you didn't come here for a history lesson on our organization, but it's a pretty great one. We've been around for longer than 50 years. We started as Book Builders West. In 2012, we pivoted and became Publishing Professionals Network, partly because the notion of what a book was really changing, but really we really wanted to focus on two things. One is celebrating excellence in bookmaking. We've had a book show that goes on for more than 50 years, and that's a big part of that. But also, we're about supporting each other in the publishing world. We're an all-volunteer nonprofit organization. That means that really it's about us being here for each other. And if you are interested in becoming a part of that, I hope that you will, one, become a member. It's super cheap. It's only 25 bucks for individual members. We've got these little QR codes throughout the David Brower Center, and you can scan and register right away. Or you can just go there and kind of see what we're up to. In addition to this annual conference that we do, we also have the book show, but we also try to do these monthly professional development Zooms, and then we also have sort of more social meetups, both on Zoom and in person, starting to do more of the in-person now that, it's not that the pandemic is over, of course, but that we're feeling a little more comfortable about gathering. And there are lots of other ways for folks to get engaged. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to any of us, and we're happy to figure out how you can engage with PPN in a way that works for you. So, it's not the last thing, but I'm going to make it quick. We're going to have a survey at the after this is over. I'm going to my college reunion this weekend, so after that, I will send it out. It's going to have some interesting questions for us about the feedback that you can give. But one of the interesting things that we're kind of thinking about is the conference is great because we have 9 sessions, but it means that 3 sessions are going on at a time, and you don't get a chance to see the other 2, and sometimes those are tough decisions to make. So we're thinking maybe we go to 2 sessions at once, reducing the number a little bit, but maybe having 4 in a row instead of 3. So those are the kind of questions that we're really going to be looking for your feedback on. At the end of the day, we usually do give our annual Distinguished Service Award at our book show, but this year we're doing it at the conference. So I'm hoping that after the last session, you'll still stick around and come into this theater for that presentation. And lastly, I want to thank all of the sponsors. They are on the back page of your program. Because without them, there's no way that this would happen. We love the David Brower Center, but it's a pretty penny. We love Ann's Catering because they do a fabulous job catering, but it's all money, and we're really working to make this a really affordable conference for everyone to go to. So That's all those things are really made possible by the sponsors. It's also made possible by the amazing number of volunteers who put this together. So people from the board, but also just general volunteers, and then the volunteers who show up today to help out with checking people in and all that kind of stuff. So if you meet someone who's been a volunteer, thank them, and I would appreciate it, and thank you all. I'm gonna introduce now Helena Brantley, who 2 years ago was our keynote speaker. And we just kept polling because now she's on our advisory board, she's in the conference, so warning. So one of my super skills is I fully in. Anyway, Helena.
Well, thank you, Dave, and good morning, everyone, and welcome, and happy Friday. I was honored when Emily Boyd here asked me to introduce our keynote speaker for the morning, Aya de León. Online, there is a San Francisco Chronicle article about a play Aya wrote back in 2004 entitled Thieves in the Temple, The Reclaiming of Hip Hop. The piece was written just ahead of the opening of the show by then journalist and now writer Hashunda Sanders, who wrote in the piece, Aya de León is everywhere. Well, it is 20 years later, and Aya de León is still seemingly everywhere. And with feet firmly rooted in this Bay Area arts and activist community that has so clearly helped to shape and nurture and grow her as a person, as an activist, and as an artist. Last year, the city of Berkeley, where she's from, crowned her its new and only second poet laureate. This new role, Aya told Iris Kwok, in a really lovely profile in Berkeley Side, is also a way to honor her mother, a former civil rights lawyer, and her legacy. In that same article is a photo of a young Aya who appears at a protest on International Day of Nuclear Disarmament in the 1980s. She is maybe 15 years old. By that age, Kwok notes that Aya had been peacefully protesting and was arrested 3 times for her witness, for championing the social causes that she cares enough to witness for. A few years ago, as most of us were still reemerging from the pandemic, Aya helped create a virtual conference to celebrate the power of Afro-diasporic fiction, nonfiction, and poetry and spoken word, to help document, imagine, and encourage the engagement of Black communities in the movement for climate justice. Just last month, right down the street at the Berkeley Public Library, Aya was one of roughly 20 Bay Area writers, including Reem Assil, Mary Roach, Ingrid Rojas, Rebecca Solnit, Kate Schatz, among others, who were honored and recognized at a really lovely fundraiser for the Berkeley Public Library, the library Aya actually grew up in and that she still frequents with her daughter. So in continuing with this Aya is everywhere theme, you should know that Aya teaches poetry at UC Berkeley. She herself has 10 published novels. A few years ago, on an episode of Black Renaissance on the local CBS affiliate here, Aya described the inspiration for her 2016 book, Uptown Thief, this way. There's this neglected area of literature, like romance and popular fiction, she explained, that a lot of young women are reading, that's sexy and fun, and a lot of the time, that kind of literature is expected to be apolitical. And I was really interested in injecting some serious themes of social justice into literature that was going to be fun and get the attention of a wide range of readers. Speaking of reading, don't you just love knowing what writers are reading? Last August, in the popular By the Book column in the Sunday New York Times Book Review, Aya was asked, what was the last great book she read? As of last summer, it was The God of Good Looks by Brianne McIver. But my favorite line from the whole interview with Aya in the New York Times Book Review last year was this one. What books are you embarrassed not to have read yet, she was asked. Her response, I don't believe in being embarrassed for not having read certain books. I think that's internalized classism. Teachers routinely use shame to control students, and many of us carry that shame and self-doubt into our adult lives and feel bad about the books we haven't gotten to. But I've decided to let all that go. Aya de León is a graduate of Harvard College in Boston and Antioch College in LA, where she earned an MFA. I'm gonna guess that 100% of the people in this room enjoy reading. So you should know that Aya is leading the team of people who are programming the Bay Area Book Festival this year in Berkeley, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary on May 4th and June 1st and 2nd. So now it should come as no surprise to know that Aya de León is also the founding and acquiring editor of an imprint of She Writes books called Fighting Chance Books. There is a really lovely episode of the Right-Minded podcast with co-hosts Brooke Warner and Grant Faulkner and Aya, where they talk about this new partnership and explore the mission of Fighting Chance Books. All right, everyone. Please help me welcome the Bay Area's own and my dear friend, Aya de León.
Best intro ever. Let me get this nice and tall. Yay. Okay. What's up with my technology? There we go. Thank you all so much. Oh my God. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, PPN. Thank you, Helena. Thank you to all the volunteers. And 50 years is amazing. I'm really a fan of figuring out how we can support institutions and make sure that they continue to be progressive and meet the needs of people today. So thanks to all the folks over the years who have made this possible. And thanks for inviting me. So yes, it's so funny because you talked about Uptown Thief, and that's actually where I'm going to start our story. My title today, of course, is Every Story is a Climate Story, How Publishing Can Help Solve the Climate Crisis. And as part of that, I'm going to tell my story, and we start with Uptown Thief. So in 2016, my first novel was published. Uptown Thief was a feminist heist novel. But I care about the environment, so I showed my protagonist recycling and encouraging people to vote. Since then, I have learned that it's going to take much more than voting and recycling to solve the climate crisis. But just like any novel's protagonist needs to go on a journey of character development, so did I. So this Uptown Thief was the first in my Justice Hustlers series. But then, the big turning point in my story was when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. I have Puerto Rican, African American, and West Indian heritage. So that really hit home for me. I was working on the fourth novel in my Justice Hustlers series. I had the whole book mostly outlined, but I was so moved to try and find a way to write about the crisis and the hurricane that I asked my editor if I could completely change topics, and she agreed. And that led to the publication of Side Chick Nation in 2019, and it was the first novel published about Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico because, of course, I was already under contract to write the second book in a two-book contract. So it was already in the pipeline, and it came out about 18 months after the hurricane. It's a heist, a disaster story, a romance, and the story of a young woman who is not thinking about the climate crisis, but she becomes politicized when she gets caught in the middle of this hurricane and begins making the connections between the climate crisis, racism, patriarchy, and colonization. And what I learned in that experience was that I could engineer the fourth book in an already developed series that was about something completely else into a novel that centered climate. And I figured if I could do that with that, I could do it with anything, and so could anyone else. So this is a great quote from screenwriter and filmmaker Scott Z. Burns, and he says, thinking more in film than books, but the stories that we make that don't include climate change, those are the things that are science fiction. Because at this point, Any story that takes place with a stable climate, with no interruptions in people's lives having to do with climate, is just not our reality anymore. So if we want to include climate in the stories or books that we're publishing, there are actually many, many ways to do it. And so this is just a quick set of possibilities on how to turn any story into a climate story. So low-hanging fruit here is current climate problems as background, right? As publishers and publishing professionals, I want to encourage all of you to consider taking that quote seriously. What if you insisted on some presence of the climate crisis in any novels set in the last 20 years? It's really simple. You can just include some mention of extreme weather, environmental crisis, wildfires, climate anxiety, or news stories about climate. It can be a background detail of any size, but that will actually bring your story into the here and now, because climate impacts are truly everywhere. Another possibility is to use current climate problems as plot devices. For example, in my latest adult novel in progress is called The Last Concert on Earth, and it centers the movement for climate justice. But before the protagonist gets involved in the movement, I've also included climate as a plot device. So as the lovers are bonding in New York City, there's a hurricane and they get stuck together. And this takes their relationship to the next level. Also, in my young adult spy novel in progress, the spy novel wants to extract someone from a location in Oregon, but they can't get to them because the roads are closed due to summer wildfires. And those of us in the Bay Area know how real that is. So, I ask, especially to the editors in the room, what are the stumbling blocks, delays, crises, and complications that characters face in the novels you're engaging? Why not include climate-related content? Also, any memoir and many nonfiction stories can also include climate. Why not? And I think it's also important for us to ground ourselves in what the stakes are for us personally. How has the climate crisis affected your life, your people's homelands? And what of those stories do you think might make a powerful book? Now, one of the ways that we often encounter climate in literature is climate dystopias. In fact, what we generally call climate fiction or cli-fi is mostly science fiction and fantasy stories set in the future 20, 50, 100 years from now. When Octavia Butler first wrote Parable of the Sower in 1993, yes, y'all, 31 years ago, it was a crucial cautionary tale. Back then, it was very radical to raise the notion of climate change in fiction at all. But dystopia can't be the only story we're telling in the climate fiction space 31 years later. Because what most of these stories share in common is that they are set in post-apocalyptic societies that develop after our societies now fail in this moment to address the climate emergency. So today's climate fiction is basically a literature predicting our failure in the here and now. It's a story of, no, we can't. It reinforces our collective hopelessness that the forces we are currently up against will defeat us. But another possibility here in stories is climate in the center. So Side Chick Nation was the first in a series of 5 novels I wrote that are all about women of color who are just going about their business, but then they run into the climate crisis and become accidental activists. I started writing my second climate novel, A Spy in the Struggle. It came out in 2020, but I started writing it in the early 90s. At the time, it was about FBI infiltration of a Black racial justice organization. But in the intervening nearly 3 decades, I made it about a Black racial and environmental and climate justice organization. So continuing to reverse engineer climate themes into my work. I started writing another climate novel of mine, Queen of Urban Prophecy, as a simple romance about a young woman rapper and her DJ who fall in love on a stadium concert tour. But Then I decided to include climate activism. If she's going around the country on a tour bus, how does extreme weather caused by climate change impact the tour? And what communities does she visit that are recovering from the impact of climate disasters? What characters are affected by the climate crisis? And above all, how does she decide to use her celebrity platform to respond to all of this? Boom. I'm stuck. It's the climate. No. No, that was my tech issues. Anyway, but I'm back. So, thinking about climate in fiction, in contrast to dystopia, there's this movement out of the UK called Throughtopia. It's not dystopian, it's not utopian. It's a throughtopia where people fight through the obstacles to get to the future that we want. And this was coined by the British ecological philosopher and Green Party activist Rupert Read. So I love this idea of Throughtopia. And before I even encountered the idea of Througtopias, I began toying with the idea of wanting to write the story that I wanted us to live as a species. I wanted to write climate novels where we actually win. I started working on a novel about a young artist who finds herself in a love triangle with a fossil fuel mogul and a climate activist. And then she sort of becomes a spy for the movement. That book came out in December 2022. It's called That Dangerous Energy. And Helena told you, I'm like writing these sexy books for young women that also have these heavy politics in them, right? And in that novel, I kept pushing to be more solution-oriented. Right, spoiler alert, it ends with some climate reparations, and there's a cameo appearance of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, because, every sexy beach read should have a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty moment. And even bolder than that was my open source young adult novel, The Mystery Woman in Room 3, which you can read online on Orion magazine. And it's about two undocumented Afro-Latina Dominican teen girls who discover a Senate kidnapping plot to stop the Green New Deal, right? Again, spoiler alert, that story ends with the Green New Deal passing. So those are great stories, and it's very exciting to envision winning, but what is the story in the real world? So in order to talk about the story in the real world, I want to just have an audience participation moment. Where are the folks who are now or have ever been athletes, competitive athletes? Do we have any athletes in the room? See, they say book people are jocks, but it's just not true. And do we have other kind of competitors? Do we have debate team people? Former debate team? Where are my former debate? Yes, I see you. Do we have folks who ran for student council, other offices? Yes, look at y'all. Okay, where are my slam poets? Any slam poets in the room? Yes, okay, I see you. What about my folks, spades, domino players, other kind of card players? Yes, I see you. Video game players. Where are my video game people? Yes, okay. Some people are like, sorta. Right, so we have some competitors in the room. So before or during a match, if someone from the other team or in a one-on-one opponent came up to you and said, you know what, go home. Don't bother to play because you've already lost. You'd be like, get the bleep out of here, right? They're just trying to get into your head, right? They're trying to get you to forfeit so that they would win. Well, that's exactly what's happening with the climate crisis. So as people are attempting to address this crisis, there's a major lie out there, which is, why bother? We are doomed, right? And I think of this as the new lie. And the new lie replaced the old lie. And the old lie was that climate change was a myth, right? Fossil fuels companies spent tons of money to hire so-called experts who would undermine the growing scientific consensus that burning fossil fuels was damaging our environment and endangering our species, right? They were like, don't worry, everything is fine. These were climate deniers, and it was not an honest mistake. ExxonMobil paid for the research way back in the day. They knew, and they intentionally suppressed the truth and spread misinformation to keep people from mobilizing against any change that would interrupt their profits. So that was the old lie. And once extreme heat and extreme weather became so bad that they couldn't deny it anymore, Enter the new lie. We are doomed. So the old lie told us to ignore the evidence around us, and the new lie is telling us to accept defeat. But we need to see both of these as the vicious lies they are, trying to get in our heads so we give up before we even get started. Because what the old lie and the new lie have in common is that they're both telling us not to take action. And if there's no problem, then there's nothing that we need to do. And if we're doomed, then there's also nothing we can do. So these are two different ways to convince us to do nothing. Because as long as we do nothing, they can continue to profit. But both of these strategies are based on a lie. We are not doomed, and another world is possible. So this idea of doom is a lie. And it's a lie in two different ways. First of all, scientists are clear. We absolutely can save our species if we make the changes needed to decarbonize our economies. But the second part of the lie is even more devastating. They say we are going to die. But the truth is, people are already dying. In Africa, in the Caribbean, in frontline communities in the global north, so many working poor communities, particularly communities of color, along with indigenous people and people in nations throughout the global south, particularly island nations. So it's a lie that we're all gonna die. Many people have died, many people are dying now, and we have a chance to save people in the future if we act now, act powerfully, and act together. One of the most dangerous lies, as I see it, is that we should believe our feelings of hopelessness when they arise, that we should take our emotional response to this crisis as an accurate measure of what is possible. In responding to this, I'll quote Tori Stevens of the online climate magazine Grist and its solution lab called Fix. Tori said that people often think of hope as a personal quality. Someone is either hopeful or not, but Tori said that he's learning that hope is a practice, a verb. Hope is something that we do. I am hopeful that we can win here, not because I can guarantee victory, but I choose to be hopeful, even though we don't know what's going to happen. The future's not here yet. I choose to be hopeful because it energizes me to fight for climate justice. And that puts me in contact with other people who have decided to fight. And even if we don't win, I will have spent my life fighting for and envisioning a path to winning, fighting for what I believe in and for the world that I want to see. Years ago, I was in this very room as part of the Bay Area Book Festival on a panel with Rebecca Solnit, and this is my favorite quote of hers. There are so many good ones, but she says, "Despair is a black leather jacket that everyone looks good in. Hope is a frilly pink dress that exposes the knees." And there's this one particular shred of hope that I've been clinging to lately, and it's this: the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell talks about this monomyth, this story that has appeared in every culture on the planet. And it's about a reluctant hero who gets called upon to leave their safe, comfortable world and venture into an unknown world. This is the plot of so many of our favorite stories. Black Panther is one of those stories. I also use the hero's journey in my work as well. And these next two images are from the film Black Panther, symbols of despair and then hope. And in the climax of any of these hero's journey stories is this: in the so-called darkest hour, the hero has lost hope. The crew is turning on each other, the power of the enemy seems unstoppable, and the hero wants to give up. Really, the hero has already given up. They're just gonna stop fighting and let the evil forces win. But then someone comes along and tells them that they can do it. Maybe it's an ancestor, maybe a dream, maybe a mentor, maybe a stranger passing through. Because it turns out that after all the physical obstacles the hero or band of heroes had fought, the final obstacle was within. Their hopelessness or guilt or shame or fear of inadequacy was the final thing holding them back. And then some kind of elder or spiritual or magical force comes and tells them that they can do it, they can fight, and they can win. And I choose to believe that human beings in every culture in the world have been telling this story for thousands of years because it is our story. Because we are those heroes and because we can win if we set aside our hopelessness and fight. So hope is something we have to reclaim. We live in a world filled with oppression and trauma. Many of us have experienced oppression and trauma, sometimes very early in our lives, in our families, in our communities, in school environments, sometimes even in the hospitals or other places where we were born. We have these early experiences of powerlessness. So when this big thing comes up, the climate crisis, we're triggered to recall these early experiences of powerlessness. We may have been defeated by whatever came for us then. We may have felt abandoned or isolated and alone. As a result, we may feel helpless in the face of this crisis that is facing our planet now. So the climate crisis is also a call to healing. And I believe that reclaiming our power to act to make the world around us right is critical. No one person can solve this crisis alone, but we're not alone. We can organize ourselves to take collective action, to act powerfully and act together. Another critical lie is that because we haven't ever built such a big movement in the past, that we can't do it now. And this speaks to how we're in the midst of another crisis, a crisis of imagination. And the good news is that very few people profit from climate chaos. And the rest of us, the vast majority of the world, wants a livable planet. And many of us are ready to fight for it. Throughout history, any nonviolent movement that has won over 3.5% of the population has been successful. By the way, this very subversive statistic comes from that fringe media source, the BBC. So when it comes to climate, many of us are sort of in that child place waiting for someone else to come fix it, someone more powerful. But I'll quote June Jordan. This quote has been attributed to her. I'm not 100% sure that it was her, but I've seen it widely attributed to her. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. And I've been tracking the sources of power in my own work, right? So in Queen of Urban Prophecy, the protagonist was a rap celebrity who uses her platform to fight for climate justice. In The Mystery Woman in Room 3, the YA novel about the Green New Deal, elected officials in the Senate use their power to pass important legislation. In That Dangerous Energy, the fossil fuel mogul is pressured to do the right thing. So all these stories have relied on powerful people using their individual power. But real solutions in the world actually rely on ordinary people using our collective power. So now I'm working on a novel called The Last Concert on Earth, which is a story in which we win climate justice. And it's so much more challenging to write than any of my thrillers because it's not science fiction or fantasy. It's realistic fiction. So I have to develop a realistic scenario in which we win climate justice. And our world is currently not even close. So this is to say, I'm trying to write a realistic story in which we would win the massive political and economic victories that would have our societies make those massive political and economic victories that would divest from fossil fuels and begin to run entirely on renewable energies. And that's how we have the title, The Last Concert on Earth. Because in sunny places, there'd be plenty of electricity during the day. Solar can power everything while the sun is up, but it's hard to have the capacity to store energy. So the problem is at night. And this novel is about a young woman musician, and it ends with the last big nighttime concert because the society is making the changes, and they don't have enough energy to power big concerts at night anymore. All that electricity will be needed for essential services, hospitals, streetlights, heat and air conditioning, etc. So initially, this novel was easier to write because it was about her using her celebrity to help the movement win. And that's a good story, but it's not enough because I want my novels to inspire everyday people to join the movement for climate justice. Why do they need to join a movement when the celebrities will take care of climate? Or like in my book about the Senate kidnapping, the political leaders will take care of climate. Or like in my book about the fossil fuel mogul, the corporate leaders will finally do the right thing. If I'm only going to write about celebrities or politicians or CEOs, then I might as well just write about people with superpowers or time travel abilities, because if elected officials or corporate leaders or celebrities who care about the environment were sufficient to solve the climate crisis, it would already be solved. The missing ingredient in the climate crisis is organized people power. So, one of the things that I decided I wanted to do was to do more than just writing my own books. I wanted to become a climate publisher. And I came up with Fighting Chance Books. Helena talked about it. It was on the podcast. And Fighting Chance Books was going to be focused exclusively on climate justice novels for adults. Stories like the ones I write about ordinary people fighting for climate justice and winning in the here and now. This was going to be my avalanche of climate justice propaganda. And it was a great vision. I got a publishing mentor through Bay Area Women in Publishing. Shout out to Baywhip. Shout out to Amy Barrett Daffin. And I took pitches at the San Francisco Writers Conference. I got a climate rom-com novel that I really wanted to publish. I wanted to publish my own adult novel in progress, like I said, The Last Concert on Earth. I got another climate author that wanted to be a donor. Yes, it was just, everything was falling into place. I was looking for additional funding. I got some good publicity. And then, as I was hustling to make my publishing into a reality, something shifted in my own trajectory. That is to say, I had gotten this great deal with a major publishing franchise. And they were going to give me a bunch of money, and I was writing the story, and the contract had an on-ramp to Hollywood just baked in. I wrote the piece. The piece was great. My editor loved it. We were going to announce at San Diego Comic-Con. It was like and for me, right? As an author, I'd been working like 30 years. I was like, my ship has finally come in. You know, it's my time. Like all the things, people, all the things. So excited, woo woo. And I quit my job for a year. I was like, I was ready. And then, just as I was hustling to make my publishing into a reality, I realized like, I'm about to have my 5 minutes of fame, right? And when you have your 5 minutes of fame, people are like, what are you doing now, Aya de León? It was going to be like, Fighting Chance Books, and it was going to be all the rage, right? I had it all planned out in my mind. So, just as I was like on the cusp, the major entertainment franchise dropped the project. They decided to go a different way. And apparently these things happen all the time, but not to me. So I was devastated. But I learned what many of you already know. Publishing is a really hard business, and it takes more than just a good idea. Once I was no longer part of a huge story with a major entertainment franchise, by the way, I can't tell you who, I signed an NDA, once I no longer had $1 zillion worth of free advertising, I had to reevaluate my publishing plan, and it didn't work anymore, right? Who knows? I have a few pitches out there, and, out there to request funding, but I'm not holding my breath, right? So before I talked about how what we currently call Clive-fied, which are dystopias, are a literature of failure, this is actually an important story of failure. Because when you're trying to make something happen, it's actually important to try things that fail. So as of now, my publishing imprint, Fighting Chance Books, has been a failure. But it turns out that there's a deep lesson for me in here. And it turns out that my writing life is deeply connected to what I've been trying to do inside of the stories. Because when I got that big deal with the entertainment franchise, I was so excited about my ship finally coming in. I was so excited about making a big splash around climate, but I had envisioned myself on these big stages like San Diego Comic-Con, imagined myself commenting on the climate crisis on CNN. I saw myself getting ink in the New York Times for my climate imprint. It was a lovely vision, but it was precisely the problem that I'm having in my books. It was about me in the spotlight as an exceptional individual making a huge difference. It wasn't about ordinary people coming together to make a change. because the climate crisis is so big. It can feel like if we're going to do anything about it, we need to find a way as an individual to take massive action. And we do need massive action, but it's massive collective action. So here's our collective. No one person has to do it alone. And I had a rough season of grieving last summer. My big break was not going to happen, but instead I got to learn to live out another possibility, which is think globally, act locally. So instead of being an international literary star, I got named Poet Laureate of my hometown of Berkeley, and I'm developing a new arsenal of poetry about climate and the November election. And I sort of stumbled into being the interim program director of the Bay Area Book Festival. And I got the opportunity to curate a big panel on the elections, panels on climate fiction, climate poetry, and climate nonfiction. I got to put authors in conversation with organizers. So at a book festival where people get inspired about an issue, they have an opportunity right then to plug in to chances to take action. And in the process, I had this new vision. It's not about me on a stage or in the spotlight with an audience of millions. It's about me being one of millions, one of hundreds of millions, one of the many people that will make up the 3.5% of the population in this nonviolent movement that will fight for climate justice and the transformation of our world and keep fighting until we win. Maybe the story here isn't that maybe the story here isn't that I became a publisher. Maybe the story here is that I became one of the many voices that could inspire a group of publishing professionals to use their power to get the message out there that we are not doomed and that if we fight for climate justice, we can win. It's like the end of The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy says, and they used to play it every year, some of y'all remember. They used to play it every year, and I just know the line by heart by watching it so many times. She says, if I ever go looking for my heart's desire, I shouldn't look any further than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, then I never really lost it to begin with. So that is a little bit about my journey. So I want you to take a moment to talk to your neighbor about your journey. I'm really curious for you to take a couple minutes each to talk about how you can contribute here. As editors, I want to encourage you to publish more climate books. As acquiring editors, I want to encourage you to maybe put out climate stories that are hopeful on your manuscript wish lists. How can you see yourself being one of millions to make a difference in climate? And this can be in books, in climate narratives, or climate action outside of your professional work in publishing. Feel free to talk about any action you would like to take inside or outside of the publishing industry, however large or small. So find a partner, and I will time for you. All right. Raise your hand if you still need a partner. Who still needs a partner? We have someone in the front. Okay. Great. All right. Figure out who's going first and go. 2 minutes each. I'll call time. Okay, thank your partner and switch. Okay, thank your partner or partners and come on back. So, all right. I'm so excited that you all still have more to say about the actions that you want to take. And the good news is that you have the rest of your life to think about and plan and take action around the climate crisis. So excellent. I hope that was a good start for many of you. So I want to close with a spoken word piece. And this is a new piece that's part of this collection that I'm developing as Poet Laureate. Oh, by the way, this is Helena mentioned the online conference that I did, Black Literature versus the Climate Emergency. So it's still available on YouTube, and I go into detail about more of all of this. So one of the things that's great about being Poet Laureate, when I was a slam poet, you had to have 3 minutes, right? 3 minutes, then you got time penalties. But now that I'm the Poet Laureate, I can kind of go on and on. So, so this is a longer spoken word piece. And it's called Burnt Straw, a meditation on the 2024 presidential election. I am an Afro-Latina, which means I had my ears pierced as an infant. Ear piercing is a mandatory welcome to the world for many Black, Latina, and South Asian female children. When I went to pierce my daughter's ears, we went to the mall and they used a tool that shot an earring through each of her ears. But back in the day, many in the Black community had a low-tech approach. Numb the ear with ice or a clothespin, use a threaded needle to pierce the ear, leave the thread in the piercing, and the next step, to keep the piercing open and clean, sometimes we would put a piece of broom straw in the piercing. Not a glamorous look, but it kept the ear from getting infected. Here's how you do it. Pull a thin piece of straw from a broom, singe it with a match to kill any germs, and put it through the ear like a stud earring, because the whole goal of the straw is to keep bacteria from getting into the piercing, which is, after all, an open wound. Some of us don't have pierced ears, or some of us have piercings in other places. Some of us with pierced ears didn't get them done as babies. Maybe we pierced our ears later and wanted to wear pretty, sparkly, shiny, blingy earrings. Maybe you like feathers or beads or coral or other natural treasures. I only wear sterling silver because I came up in the age of apartheid when African people were dying for gold and diamonds, and this death for bling was nothing new. Gold was the original motivation for indigenous genocide throughout the Americas. Later, the gold rush brought another genocidal wave to indigenous communities near where we live in California. Gold should never have been put before human life, should never be again, but gold, 14 karat, 24 karat, is a metal of great power. It is resilient and adaptive because you can put it in an open wound and it won't irritate the tissue. Why am I telling you this? Because up until recently, the United States has been a nation of clip-on earrings. The clip-on earring is about pretense. The U.S. has always pretended to be something that it is not, pretending to be a land of equality, pretending to be a real democracy, giving the illusion that it is a full ring. But that circle has never been complete. That clip-on earring can be pulled off quickly and easily, leaving the earlobe essentially untouched. As a so-called democracy, the U.S., up until recently, did not pierce the power balance. The Constitution said that all men should be equal, and that meant only land-owning white men. And up till now, the democratic process could be counted on to primarily advance the hegemony of wealthy white men. But over the last century and a half, our movements have finally pierced that ear. We have broken through between women voting and black people voting and immigrants of color getting citizenship and voting and poor and working class people voting. The domination of wealthy white men is in jeopardy, is in question. Those who like the old order can see the change coming. We're starting to elect democratic socialist and left-wing congresspeople. We have seen people of color in the president and vice president position, even if they do support these moderate neoliberal agendas. These brown faces in the White House have certainly freaked out the old guard. So after this piercing, we are in the period where there is danger of infection, of insurrection. Fascism is the infection. Authoritarianism is the infection. The defendant candidate facing multiple indictments whose name I will not even speak aloud is the infection. So we have this piercing and this danger of infection, and in November we have a chance to choose how to move forward. We are deciding between our options for next step in this piercing that is called democracy, and it is not an inspiring set of choices. Which is not a new thing for us. Many of us didn't want to vote for Biden back in 2020, fresh off 4 miserable years of the defendant. We were disgusted by the fact that Biden was cozy with segregationists, that he sold out Anita Hill, that he is credibly accused of sexual assault, that we are in this awful climate crisis and he's in bed with the fossil fuel industries. Some will never be able to see him as anything but a mortal enemy for his response to Palestine. People are disgusted, people are discouraged, people are despairing, but I want to offer a critical perspective. When these people tell you to vote for Joe Biden, they are going to try to convince you that he is a gold earring. He is the best earring, that he is going to dangle like a diamond and catch the light and take you forward into a glamorous neoliberal future. I say no. I will never believe that Joe Biden is a gold earring. I will never invest in the Democrats' fossil fuel-soaked agenda. But I am going to vote for Biden, y'all, because I know what the old school black women knew when there was danger infection. Biden is not an earring, not a precious metal. He's a placeholder. He's a piece of burnt broom straw. I wish there was a real gold earring on the ballot. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, but we got to choose between Biden and infection, between Biden and this hard-won piercing of democracy closing up. The defendant, who I will not name, and his people are clear that if they get into office, they are trying to close up this piercing and never let it open again, never leaving office. And as far as the climate crisis, we will most certainly miss our window to take climate action because a far-right agenda is all about driving capitalism till the wheels fall off. Exploiting, extracting everything, everywhere, everyone that they can, as long, as much, as fast, as far as possible. Joe Biden is not the goal. Joe Biden is not the jewel. Joe Biden is a burnt-ass piece of straw that we need to put in this piercing till we disinfect it enough and build up our resources enough till we get a real earring, a fair trade, responsibly and sustainably sourced golden governance for the needs of the people, a hoop earring that is a full circle, because if the far right gets in, the time for earrings will be over. It will be all about survival. But neoliberalism is also hard to survive. This constant consumerism, ever-expanding markets, labor exploitation. In the neoliberal world, capital is king. And those of us who don't have the means to consume are locked out. Part of both parties' classism is to measure people by what they can buy and to shame and blame anyone who's poor. And when it comes to our democracy, some of us are ashamed about being poor right now. We have a poverty of options in national leadership on the ballot. It is humiliating to work as hard as we've worked for decades, no, centuries, and have a national leadership contest between these two reprehensible men. And one of the things people do when they're poor is they put things on a credit card. They want to look and feel more prosperous than they are. Maybe we wish we had more options of who to vote for, candidates who reflected our values. Robert Kennedy, Jill Stein, even our beloved Cornel West family, these candidates are the earrings we cannot afford. I know that those of us who love Kennedy and Stein and West really don't want to see us fall into fascism. And we know that this two-party system is broken, is breaking, and is so corrupt that we don't get candidates who actually reflect the will of the people. I look forward to the day when we can have real progressive leaders at every level, but we haven't built that power yet. And these alternative candidates don't yet have the power to win. If we can't get them elected, then what is our strategy in voting for them or encouraging other people to vote for them? What is our goal here? Because the outcome of their candidacy is likely to take votes away from Joe Biden, but as much as we may dislike him, voting for these candidates is a missed opportunity to resist fascism when we need every vote. We can't afford to put these independent and third-party candidates on our credit card. We can't afford this conspicuous consumption in 2024 that will make it look like we have more power than we do. These candidates are shinier and more sexy than Joe Biden, but we can't afford sexy right now. We are voting for survival. We need to shop with the funds we have. If third-party and independent candidates disrupt the election in favor of fascism, we are not ready for when the bill comes due on January 20th, 25, and authoritarianism gets into office. After all, Adolf Hitler was democratically elected, and then he used the power of the state to burn down all the checks and balances on his power. So, with the threat of fascism so close, we need to work with our cash on hand, with the power we have built, and all we can afford is this damn burnt-ass piece of straw. But we need to protect against the infection of fascism, and that's not where we're going to stop. We are voting for a chance to do the deep work, to get a real hoop earring and complete the circle in the tradition of those elderly grandmothers that we can use that burnt straw as a placeholder, bringing the hope for the gold earrings for that baby girl in the future. And they were going to spend their lives working to make that reality. And then in the meantime, we can use that burnt straw to stave off infection. We can use that burnt straw to keep things open for us to do our work, because we're not electing a hero or even a leader. We are electing the set of conditions in which our movements will do the work to make the changes that we know we need to make in climate, in racial justice, in gender justice, in economic justice. We don't have a lot of time, but these are changes that we can make, but we need the right conditions. So that's my provocation to you. 2024, vote burnt straw. Thank you.
Okay, so you may know that the theme of this conference is publishing for the greater good. If that doesn't inspire you to be part of a community that is working to make the world a better place, I don't know what will. I don't have a lot more to say other than we've got a break coming up. Use that opportunity to connect with everyone else. This is about connection and community and making the world a better place, and what better way to do that than by schmoozing. The one thing that I forgot to mention is that if you need the Wi-Fi password, it's on the inside bottom right of your program. I don't think it's a private one, so be careful. You know, if you have privacy concerns, that's something to think about. So the only other thing I want to say is there are going to be 3 session rooms. This is the Goldman Theater. The one next door is Kinsey, and upstairs is the Tamil Pius room. And then for lunch, there's a wonderful outdoor, I think it's supposed to be windy, but I think it should be nice otherwise, outdoor patio. The food will be down here, but you can take it up there. And have a great time, and thank you once again, Aya. That was amazing.